Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today, I am here to wish a very happy birthday to Kami Cotler. I have had the joy of knowing Kami since she was 6 years old when we first met filming The Homecoming, and she was just this bright, adorable, smart as a whip, just so engaging, young person. And even at 13, I looked at her and thought how remarkable she was. She always knew her lines. She understood her character. And she once said that she was an expert on being a child, that whatever directors might think they knew, she knew more than they did about how to be a child at that point in her life. I remember we all carried her around because she was just that child that you just wanted to cuddle and pick up and sit in your lap and all of that. I don't remember her ever having childish temper tantrums. Perhaps her mother might recall some at times. I have no idea what she was particularly like at home, but I certainly never saw it. She was not volatile in her emotions. She just always seemed pretty easygoing and straight ahead. And her feelings could be hurt, and she could cry about things. But she was tough, and she was game, and she was just a joy to be around. I mean, there's such tremendous pressure on being a child, and to be that young and working the long hours that we worked. It takes a very special child, and that is Kami. From being a very special child, became a very special grown-up as well. I have favorite Elizabeth moments and episodes and things that I think stand out. Of course, in The Homecoming, just the classic line, "I don't feel like a pissant."
She said we were pissants.
Well, you know better than that, don't you, Elizabeth?
I don't feel like a pissant.
I thought was so adorable and so just innocent. And she just knew how to just be real on camera. And then getting the broken doll, that scene, she was just so cute in. And in the cracking walnuts in the barn scene, when she was so insistent that she didn't want to have babies, she wanted to have puppies. And that adorable scene between her and Jim Bob, as he explained to her that she was going to be a woman and women had babies, not puppies. It seemed like in so many episodes in the early seasons, even if the episode wasn't about Elizabeth, you couldn't help but be drawn to her scenes. She had so many adorable moments, and she was a real scene stealer. And they always say there's a reason you don't work with kids and animals. And she knew how to make the most out of the moments that Elizabeth had. In The Foundling, it was very sweet because she was jealous of this little girl who seemed to be getting all this attention, and didn't quite know how to deal with that. In The Boy from the CCC, she was very heartbroken over what happened with this raccoon. And she also found a way to get through the walls and defenses that Gino had built up. And he opened up to her in a way that he didn't with other people, because it was so easy to trust this child with the truth. And so he had a real impact. She had an impact on him. He had an impact on her. In The 5-Foot Shelf, she was just so sharp, and she knew she was going to win this doll, and she did. And she considered giving it away because she knew that that George really wanted one for his daughter. But in the end, she just couldn't quite do it, which we all sort of agreed was probably the more accurate ending for what went on there. In The Search, of course, it was Elizabeth's fault that they got lost in the first place. And there were times where I found myself going, "Oh, quit whining, and why are you being so difficult? Why are you being..." But keeping in mind that, the character was meant to be a little girl, and that children don't always do as they're told, and they have their own ideas about things. And that was Kami. She did have her own idea about things and wasn't afraid to speak up and share her ideas. So as much as we would have liked her to have not run off and caused Jim Bob and Olivia to be lost as well, we would have had no story if she hadn't done that. So it made a lot of sense. And she did a really great job with that episode. In The Burnout, she went through a very realistic situation of being afraid that she somehow was the blame for different things, bad things that had been happening. She thought that, things that she loved, people she loved died. And so she decided that she wasn't going to connect with the family. She was going to keep her distance so that nobody else would die, so nothing bad would happen to them. And had to come to understand that these things sometimes just happen and that she wasn't to blame for it. Then in the Ferris wheel, she had a chance to deal with doing some real stunt work there. And I took a look at what Kami talked about that in Goodnight John Boy. And here's what she had to say about it. Being on the series provided me with many adventures. I swam in a pond with real beavers. I dangled from a harness 8 feet in the air filming the dream sequence for the Ferris wheel. I was treed by hogs, rode horses, spoke my lines while Myrtle the goat butted me. On camera, I fell out of the treehouse 14 feet and received a nasty egg-sized bump on the back of my head. I got to ride in parades and answer phones on telethons and worked with actors and crew members who had phenomenal past experiences, met all kinds of fascinating people, burned things, built things, and blew things up with school teacher Glenn Woodmansey in the school trailer. All in all, a pretty good childhood. So that was some of her look back at the Ferris wheel, but also life as a child actor. And, there's some tough things and some challenges, but, she clearly had a great time, as we all did. A lot was asked of her in The Warrior as well, where there was a whole scene where she was trying to understand what was going on with this older warrior and why he felt so compelled to save his family's burial grounds and stuff, and despite being sent to jail. And so she had this wonderful scene that she shared with the actor in the jail scene where it was really all about her. And she just did a fabulous job there. In the Children's Carol was one of the times she got to work with her real brother, Jeff, and as one of the two children that were brought over from England because their parents wanted to get them away from the bombings in England. So that was, I think, fun for her to get to work with Jeff. In The Ordeal was part of some of these episodes where she talked about that a lot of things happened to Elizabeth. Here she ended up with her legs in braces. So Elizabeth, she fell down a mine shaft in The Return, and she fell out of the treehouse, and she got butted by the goat, and she had her legs, in casts. So poor Elizabeth was a little accident prone. She also spoke about The Ordeal in Goodnight John Boy, where she said, looking back over some of the episodes, I remember that Michael Learned said once that Elizabeth's experiences filming the show were enough to make her quite nuts. Her raccoon died, her horse had to be shot, she was haunted by a poltergeist, her suppressed memory of a man's accidental death resulted in a spate of sleepwalking, and she climbed a Ferris wheel in her sleep. She broke both her legs and was unable to walk. Her favorite teacher died, and she was taken hostage by an angry local man. Quite a full life. So yes, lots of things happened to Elizabeth, but Kami played all those scenes and brought us through it and allowed us to share those experiences and emotions with Elizabeth. So The Ordeal was another standout episode for Kami. The Captive, where she learned to drive and then had to drive a drunk Cora Beth and Amy home because Cora Beth was unable to drive. So again, there was her having to step up into more of an adult role. And then sadly, The Idol was the episode where the teacher that she loved died. And then there was the author that she really loved that she asked John Boy to go visit in New York, and he did, and he came back and had to tell her that she had passed away, but he brought some original pages from her manuscript that her mother had given to John Boyd to give to Elizabeth. So she had lots of experiences, more good than bad, fortunately. And I loved the relationship with Amy when Rachel Longacre joined the series as Amy Godsey, and the two of them got to do so many fun things. And that was just a wonderful relationship between the two girls. In real life, I have shared so many experiences with Kami over the years, as she mentioned, parades and personal appearances. And we went to the opening of an exhibit at the Wax Museum, and she and I went to Aurora, Ohio for the opening of a children's section of SeaWorld. We went down to the animal park and got to play with the animals, and just countless things. And then in more recent years, the various different Walton reunions and autograph shows and things that we have shared together. And we've gotten to know her daughter, Callie. I haven't seen her son, Cotton, in ages because he lives in another state. But we've had this lifetime of experiences together. And I remember when she was younger and wanted to go clothes shopping, and I went clothes shopping with her and tried to help her pick out some outfits that she could coordinate and wear. So I hope that was helpful to her. So many fun memories. And I remember at the studio, she has forever been a huge sports fan, particularly at USC teams. Her mother and father were both alumni. And so even to this day, there's been times where we have been, I remember she and her husband and Eric and his wife, Cindy, came to spend a weekend with my husband and I by the beach. And when we were out and driving around and doing things, she was like, had the ball game on. So it was I think it was a basketball game. It was either a basketball game or a football game, but she really follows those teams. Those are her teams. So she can probably tell you, a lot about what's going on there. Although she did a couple of other things after the homecoming. I think the homecoming was her first job. And then she did a very short-lived show, Me and the Chimp, with Ted Bessel and a monkey and a chimpanzee. And it was, I think, a pilot for a series. And we are grateful that it didn't get picked up, because otherwise she would have been committed to that show and wouldn't have been able to do the Waltons. And I can't imagine the Waltons or my life without Kami in it. After the show, she continued on into her higher education and ended up getting a teaching certificate, and eventually went and taught in Schuyler in that region of Virginia. And she wanted to experience a smaller community, a rural community, and something became available there, and she had that chance. And how special for those kids to get to have Elizabeth Walton as their teacher and to use all she had learned on the show, and so many skills from working her entire life to enrich those children's lives. And then she came back out to the U.S., to California, and started working in an environmental charter school. I think she ended up becoming a school principal there, an administrator, and just helping in so many capacities. And she still works freelance to help them out. She is married with 2 children and just has a wonderful life that she seems to enjoy very much, which is all we can really ask for in our lives, isn't it? To be happy and healthy. Kami's actual birthday is tomorrow, June 17th, but please join me in wishing her a very happy birthday. And she does look in on my YouTube channel at times, and she does respond sometimes to comments and share additional information. So keep an eye out. I'll let her know, and maybe she'll have a chance to look through some of your comments and messages for her. But also, she is very, very active on her Facebook page and shares a lot of of information about the filming of the Waltons and being on the back lot of the studio and hanging out and all the things that she did. So check out her Facebook page as well. Thank you for joining me. I will be back with more behind the scenes of the Waltons and more of your questions in a segment of Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.